It's great to be with you guys again today. I love Texas Alliance for Life. So proud of the work that you guys do. As you heard, I work for Charlotte Lozier Institute, and you may not have heard of Charlotte Lozier. We are science and statistics on life issues. So I'll put in a plug. Everything I'm going to say today, you can find on our website, and I hope I will tell you some things that you don't already know. And then I hope you will take what I've taught you today and then tell your friends, and because we really do need to educate the public on so many aspects of this issue. As you heard, I've been a practicing OBGYN in San Antonio, Texas for over 30 years. I was initially drawn to this profession because I was in awe of the miracle of childbirth. I continue to marvel over the complex development of the unborn child. I rejoice with a mother and father when we detect their child's heartbeat on ultrasound only 4 weeks after his life began. I'm filled with wonder when I observe a child suck his thumb at 10 weeks gestation on ultrasound, and I recognize that his preference from one hand over the other gives me advance notice of whether he's going to be right or left-handed when he's born. We are truly fearfully and wonderfully made in God's own image. I'm pro-life because I want to protect vulnerable unborn humans whom God loves from intentional destruction. And I'm sure that many of you are passionate about this issue for the same reason. But we recognize that our society has developed a hard heart. There are many who will acknowledge that the unborn child is a genetically distinct living human being, and yet they still advocate for abortion, because they feel this small, immature human does not have as much value as his mother. And they feel his mother needs access to abortion in order to optimize her own well-being. Sadly, it appears more and more Americans have developed this attitude. While polls since Roe v. Wade have consistently shown approximately an even distribution between those who identify as pro-life and pro-choice, this has worsened since the Dobbs decision, with the recent Marist poll documenting that only 37%, only 1 in 3 Americans, consider themselves pro-life. Our movement has a public relations problem. Over time, my interest in the topic of abortion has shifted to the myriad ways in which this action harms women. I've cared for women whose eyes would fill with tears when they discussed an abortion they had decades ago, still experiencing loss and regret. The maternal instinct is strong, and it is unnatural for a mother to seek to end the life of her own child, yet inexplicably, this is the story of 1 in 4 women in our country. 4 years ago, I left an obstetrics and gynecology practice that I loved to devote myself full-time to understanding the circumstances that lead to this painful decision for so many of our sisters, in hopes of convincing society that we can do so much better for women. We recognize intuitively that there is a crisis affecting the women in our country today, even if we cannot always put our finger on the source. The pro-life feminist Frederica Matthews Green once said, "No woman wants an abortion as she wants an ice cream cone or a Porsche. She wants an abortion as an animal caught in a trap wants to gnaw off its own leg." She offered this analogy. If you were in charge of a nature preserve and you noticed that the pregnant female mammals were trying to miscarry their pregnancies by eating poisonous plants or injuring themselves, what would you do? Would you think of it as a battle between the pregnant female and her unborn and find ways to help those pregnant mammals miscarry? No, of course not. You would immediately think something is really wrong in this environment. Something is creating intolerable stress, so much so that animals would rather destroy their own offspring than bring them into the world. You would strive to identify and correct whatever factors were causing this stress in the animals. In the research for her book, Real Choices, when Frederica asked post-abortive women, "What would you have needed in order to finish the pregnancy?" they repeatedly told her, "I needed just one person to stand by me. So many women obtain abortions abandoned and alone, convinced it is the only option available. Abortion is a symptom of the myriad of ways in which our society has gone off the rails, as it has developed its own standard of truth and ethics, increasingly alienated from a Judeo-Christian understanding of the meaning of sex, marriage, and family. At first glance, to a woman in crisis, abortion may appear to be an easy way to reset the clock and erase a perceived mistake. Many women fall into this decision without much conscious thought. Sadly, for secular women in our society, the promiscuous sexuality they have been taught as normative, the fear of pregnancy and motherhood, and the utilitarian ethics they have internalized have convinced them that ending a pregnancy through abortion is a neutral action that will spare them hardship. Even our Christian sisters may perform this reflexive action to spare themselves from perceived judgment from fellow believers, silencing the moral teachings they have received. Surveys have shown that abortion may be as common in churchgoers as outside of the church. And the majority of women in abortion clinics identify as Christian. Yet, after this action, women cannot easily erase the knowledge of what they have done by intentionally ending the lives of their children. And regret, guilt, and shame often cloud their thinking for many years to come. The narrative that abortion is a woman's choice has left many fathers disengaged, refusing to marry the mother of their child and provide paternal support, leading to a crisis of fatherless children in our country. Other men may sit back, reassuring their pregnant partner that they will support her decision, without providing the reassurance a woman longs to hear, that he loves her, wants to marry her, and raise a family with her. The majority of women who obtain abortions do so because they don't want to become a single mother. Shotgun marriages have become a quaint action of the past. You are all aware that a little over 3 years ago, God worked an amazing miracle in our country. After almost 50 years of despair that we could ever legally protect unborn children, Roe v. Wade was overturned. Yes. Returning the ability for legislatures to protect the lives of our most vulnerable children. But this action, as I'm sure you're aware, did not end this spiritual war. In fact, in many ways, the battle has become even more deadly. After the Dobbs decision, there has been a seismic shift in the landscape surrounding this most divisive of all issues that I want to help you understand. There were immediate legal challenges against every state's pro-life protections. 21 states have chosen to protect unborn children legislatively, and 3 are still trying to defend their laws in court more than 3 years later. I've been privileged to have the opportunity to defend the laws of many states, including Texas, in the Zarowski versus Texas and Cox versus Texas lawsuits brought by the Center for Reproductive Rights, and I have to say that it was you guys that brought me into that, so thank you for that. Thankfully, the Texas Supreme Court upheld our laws when a liberal Austin judge sought to strike them down. In many states, ballot initiatives have misrepresented the laws to the public, and coming soon to a state near you, because the goal is to get these happening in every state. Unfortunately, several conservative states, Missouri, Ohio, Montana, Kansas, Arizona, were fooled into voting for these initiatives, which allow abortion until the age of viability and beyond, if it can be justified for the health of the mother. Under the assumption, they voted for these because they were told that they were needed to protect unrelated issues like in vitro fertilization, contraception, miscarriage management, care for pregnancy emergencies. The goal of the abortion industry to operate with impunity became immediately obvious when Planned Parenthood sued the state of Missouri the day after their initiative passed to remove all remaining common sense abortion limitations, like facility standards, admitting privileges, ultrasound requirements, waiting periods, complication reporting, even parental consent. And you may be aware this just went to trial in Missouri a couple of weeks ago. So hopefully the judge was convinced by our argument, but we will see. An aggressive PR campaign ensued following Dobbs, telling the public that abortion must be available as the solution to women's complex problems, that it was anti-woman to protect an unborn child, as if women and their children are natural enemies, and this is a zero-sum game in which we must choose sides. This narrative avoids addressing the real issues facing women, such as the destruction of the institution of marriage, relationship and family breakdown, risky sexual behavior, financial troubles, poor social support. These narratives, promoted not just by pro-abortion media, but by most major medical organizations, then doubled down on fear-mongering, implying that abortion limitations would cause obstetricians to be unable to care for women in true pregnancy emergencies, and this would result in increases not just in maternal mortality, but in infant mortality, they say, for the children that are fortunate enough to survive until birth. I'm sure you've seen the articles from sources like ProPublica, in which they misrepresent cases of poor quality medical care to falsely imply that abortion laws would not allow doctors to intervene. As a demonstration of how biased our media is, ProPublica won a Pulitzer Prize for these lies. This is so deceptive and harmful to women. The laws of every state specifically tell a doctor he can use his good faith or reasonable medical judgment, that is, his clinical expertise and his common sense, to determine when and how to intervene to protect a pregnant woman's life in an emergency. No law requires immediacy, that a woman be dying, or certainty that she will die, and no doctor has been prosecuted in this country for performing an abortion to protect a mother's life. But to demonstrate how rare the need for an abortion in this situation is, in over 5,000 deliveries, I have never needed to resort to intentionally killing my unborn patient to protect his mother. Texas has reported about 50 to 100 abortions yearly performed for life of the mother since Dobbs. But remember, we have over 400,000 babies born in our state every year. Very, very rare. Texas is a pro-life state. For decades, our country has had the highest maternal and infant mortality rates in the developed world, even though we had almost no restrictions on abortion for 50 years. This action was not protecting women, but in many ways was worsening their risk. I have thought and written quite a bit about maternal mortality. In fact, my friend, Dr. Pat Marmion, is here, and he and I co-wrote a paper years ago that was peer-reviewed. But if you're interested in this topic, come to the website, our On Women's Health section. I've really addressed this quite a bit because I think this argument particularly has really grown legs. People have become convinced that in order to protect mothers, they need to vote against protecting babies. Unfortunately, Black women have both the highest abortion rates and the highest maternal mortality rates in the United States, with almost 20 million of their population lost to the eugenic action of abortion. This is approximately the number of Black Americans who were living in our country during the Civil Rights era. It's devastated their population. But the most insidious and evil action of all has been the widespread dissemination of unsupervised abortion drugs across our country, as I'm sure you're aware. In the two-drug regimen, mifepristone blocks progesterone, cuts off that critical hormonal support, causing the unborn child to die. It's followed by misoprostol, which induces contractions, labor, to expel the pregnancy tissue. The regimen is approved by the FDA until 10 weeks gestation, but it is often used far later than that. And it causes over 2/3 of all abortions in our country. It is a horrible experience for a woman, causing prolonged bleeding, labor-like pain, and often she will see the child's body that she has chosen to abort. This was a long time in the planning. Mifepristone was approved by the FDA 25 years ago to solve a staffing problem because the abortion industry couldn't find enough doctors willing to end human life. So they decided to outsource that action to the women themselves. The FDA broke many of its own rules to approve the drugs, including fast-tracking it through the accelerated approval process meant for drugs that treat life-threatening illnesses. The efforts behind its approval were funded by eugenic population control advocates. Although initially tightly regulated, critical safeguards were removed in 2016 and 2021, raising the gestational age limit, removing the requirement for a doctor to prescribe the drugs or for complications to be reported, and dropping the required visits from 3 to none. Today, these drugs can be ordered by telemedicine or online, delivered in the mail or through a pharmacy, permitting a totally medically unsupervised, self-managed abortion, even in states like ours with laws trying to protect these precious lives. No pre-abortion testing is required, no doctor, no follow-up, no federal requirement for complication reporting, and no confirmation of who is obtaining the drugs. Without an ultrasound, potentially deadly ectopic pregnancies may remain undiagnosed. Without an ultrasound, if a woman underestimates her gestational age, she may take the drugs at a higher gestational age when they are less effective, increasing her risk of complications. Without pre-abortion labs and provision of ROGAM, if indicated, future severe pregnancy complications may occur. Without in-person informed consent counseling, it is impossible to know if the person ordering the drugs is aware of the drug's risk, alternatives to abortion, or even if she truly desires an abortion. Hemorrhage, infection, retained pregnancy tissue, even continuing living unborn children who may later suffer serious birth defects from misoprostol are all common complications, affecting about 1 in 20 women, even when the drugs are taken as the FDA recommends. But if accidentally or intentionally taken in the second trimester of pregnancy, 4 in 10 women will need surgery for a failed abortion. The FDA maintains a black box warning and a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy on mifepristone because of the potential for deadly sepsis or hemorrhage. Yet, in a schizophrenic fashion, ideologues within the FDA have removed many of the regulations protecting women, demonstrating that these drugs are not about women's health, but about unrestricted abortion access, even if the women become collateral damage. Where are these pills coming from? Some pills come from international organizations like Aid Access in the Netherlands, who report that over 80% of their business is to pro-life states, with pills manufactured in India or China. Some come from abortion providers in blue states, brazenly defying the law by mailing these deadly drugs into our states in violation of the Federal Comstock Act. They feel empowered because many of these pro-abortion states have passed shield laws protecting these abortionists from lawsuits and extradition by pro-life states. As you know, brave states like Texas are fighting as hard as we can, but these drugs are still flooding our state. Women are being now told to obtain advanced provision of the drugs before they are pregnant, so they will be readily available when they're needed. Some NGOs are bringing them across the Mexican border and distributing them to women in South Texas through their networks. I have spoken to many women who took mifepristone almost without giving it a thought because they already had the drugs in their medicine cabinet, and then they immediately regretted this action. The easy bypass of pro-life state laws has led the Guttmacher Institute to estimate there are more abortions in America today than before the overturn of Roe v. Wade. What happens to women when they suffer a complication from drugs that have been mailed to them from abortion providers hundreds or even thousands of miles away? The FDA documents that approximately 1 in 25 women will seek emergency room care after taking these drugs. I continue to practice as an obstetric hospitalist in a small hospital in South San Antonio, and I've cared for dozens of these women in the emergency room. Often they will not disclose they've taken abortion drugs, both because abortion advocates tell them they can pretend they've had a miscarriage, it will not affect their care, and because they have been misled to believe that they will be prosecuted for obtaining an abortion. This is false, of course. No state will prosecute the woman who obtains an abortion, but this deceptive narrative may cause an injured woman to delay seeking care. Additionally, it does make a difference when doctors don't understand the clinical scenario. Our research at Charlotte Lozier Institute has documented that 84% of known abortion drug complications in emergency rooms are miscoded as due to miscarriage. These ER visits are not just for reassurance, as more than 80% of these visits were given a severe or life-threatening acuity code. When a doctor is unaware that a woman has already failed abortion with mifepristone and misoprostol and thinks she's having a natural miscarriage, he's likely to prescribe more of the drugs she's already failed, rather than performing the surgical aspiration she needs. Miscoded women, on average, required 3 visits before finally receiving the surgical care they needed. Have you seen recent news reports of men ordering the drugs and coercing women into unwanted abortions? This is nothing new, of course. Abortion has been used by selfish men for generations to facilitate their manipulation and abuse of women. But the widespread availability of these pills is worsening the problem. Sex traffickers can buy these pills in bulk. It is documented that a medical clinic is the most likely place that a trafficked woman would be identified and helped, but no more, since clinics are never seeing them. Incestuous abusers can now easily get rid of the evidence of their crimes and continue their abuse undetected. Many women obtain abortions under pressure when it is not what they want to do. In one survey, 60% of women with a history of abortion said they would have preferred to give birth if only they had the support of the baby's father and resources to help them through the tough time. Nearly a quarter of these women described their abortion as unwanted or coerced, and 2/3 described it as inconsistent with their values, but reported that external pressures caused them to feel that abortion was their only choice. Fortunately, we're in Texas, and we're fighting back. As you know, we were the first state to limit abortion before the Dobbs decision with our heartbeat law, and one of the first to restrict all elective abortions after Dobbs with our trigger law, the Human Life Protection Act. We also passed a law mandating continuing medical education for obstetricians and hospital attorneys when it became clear that the pro-abortion medical organizations in our state had no desire to clear up the confusion regarding the medical exceptions to our pro-life protections. Now we've become the first to adopt a law against abortion pill trafficking with SB 7, the Women and Children's Protection Act. This bounty-style provision gives individuals a right to sue and collect damages from providers of illegal abortions. The recently filed lawsuit, Rodriguez versus Coito, is the first suit invoking this provision. A Texas man is suing a California abortionist who provided drugs to kill 2 of his unborn children. Have you read stories of women delivering stillborn babies after using abortion drugs at advanced gestational ages and throwing their children in the trash? I've spoken to women who've been devastated to see their child in the toilet, tearfully bringing him out and burying him in the yard. We have a mental health crisis in our country, particularly affecting young women. The CDC tells us that 60% of teen girls have persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, and 30% seriously contemplated suicide in the past year. Can you imagine how much worse it will become as women increasingly have these traumatic experiences? The college dorm bathroom has become the new abortion clinic in our country. The privacy of a woman's own home has now become the site of unspeakable trauma. There are many factors increasing the risk of mental health complications following abortion, including young age, pressure to end a desired pregnancy, prior mental health issues, repeated abortions, and later abortions. Did you know that the US is one of only 8 countries in the world where there are no national upper gestational age limits on abortion? 29 of our states have no limits. And if a woman can find a willing abortionist, a child's life can be ended at any time in pregnancy. Likely, many of these lives end through active or passive infanticide after birth, as many children survive labor induction abortions if they are not killed first, and no one is supervising these morally compromised late-term abortionists. High-risk women are likely to experience anxiety, depression, substance and alcohol abuse, and self-harm after abortion. This can lead to deaths of despair, suicides, overdoses, accidental deaths from high-risk taking activity, even intimate partner homicide, as dysfunctional relationships continue to worsen in the aftermath of abortion. We have very little ability to link such deaths to abortion in our country due to our poor quality data and incomplete record keeping, but high quality European studies document that in the year following abortion compared to childbirth, a woman is 2 to 4 times as likely to die of any cause, 6 to 7 times as likely to commit suicide, 2 to 4 times as likely to die of an accident, and 10 to 14 times as likely to be murdered. Abortion is killing not just our future generations, but many of our young women while we remain unaware. I want to conclude, I've depressed you guys, I'm sorry. So I do want to conclude with a ray of hope, the availability of abortion pill reversal. Mifepristone, as I told you, blocks the progesterone receptors, cutting off hormonal support, resulting in the death of the embryo or fetus. But we know in much the same way that Narcan reverses an opioid overdose, giving high-dose progesterone can reverse that effect and increase the likelihood that the baby survives to more than 2 out of 3. Desperate women who retrospectively realize they desire their baby after they take mifepristone can find the APR hotline through a Google search, and they will be connected with me or another local OB-GYN who can prescribe this intervention. When I've cared for these women, sometimes as many as 4 in a single week, I immediately connect them with my local pregnancy center, where they receive an ultrasound to check on the baby and the emotional, material, and relationship support they need to make the decision they really want to make to give birth to their children. Fortunately, there are over 2,700 such pregnancy centers in our country, with approximately 200 in Texas alone. So thank you all for what you've done to support this fight against abortion. This battle continues, and sadly, it's unlikely to be resolved in our lifetime, but it is worth fighting. We can do no less to protect our future children and the women and families who are caught in the crosshairs of this evil agenda. Thanks for your attention.